the one design I remember that Frank did was a Sabre scanner, which was, I believe, the world's first side scanner. And this was developed for use in Europe, where clerks normally sit at the counter when they're scanning. And previous scanners required a lot of room under the counter so that clerks couldn't sit at the counter. The Sabre scanner projected just a few inches below the surface of the counter, so clerks were able to sit there. And we built, I think, about 40 units for Migros in Switzerland. And Frank did the whole optical design. And as I recall, he did it on a Hewlett-Packard calculator that was programmable and basic. I think that's quite an achievement.
Do you remember which one?
HP 67.
67.
That was quite an achievement, because I've done something similar later on with all the tools that PC has to offer. And it's relatively difficult to imagine how one could do the whole design using, well, one could, but it certainly requires a lot more iterations. It's not as easy. So that's my primary impression of Frank. He is a good mentor and good designer, and came up with a lot of novel ideas.
Were there rotating mirrors, or what was driving the beam in that design?
There were a number of fixed mirrors plus a rotating mirror.
Okay.
My experience with Frank Nickl is when I first came to work at Datachecker in 1979, is Datachecker was already in production with the bar XX scanner, which incorporated the design using helium neon laser and avalanche photodiode and optics, including a rotating polygon. It was a fascinating product for me because it involved so many of the different technical disciplines. And Frank Nickl headed up the project with his background as a physicist. He was a wealth of information, not just in one specific area, but he understood a lot about the algorithms of decode logic. He understood about optics, mechanics, you name it. He could sit down and he could draw it out on paper in pencil and come up with the formulas and the theories for pretty much any problem you could come up with from his physics background. And originally, since the department was relatively small, it was an opportunity for me to mentor under him, since there was not much competition for his time for wanting to learn all of that stuff. It's usually there aren't many people who want to get involved on that level in a lot of the technical issues. So I spent a great deal of time working with him. Also, as in my role, I had designed preamplifiers and the early analog system, converting the signal to digital from analog, which is, it's an optical image is focused onto the photodetector, and then that's converted to an analog electrical signal and then to a digital signal. And since I was involved on the preamplifier design and the analog to digital, then I had to understand a lot about the optics and the mechanical system there in order to understand what the signal was I was looking at. So I spent a great deal of time with Frank Nickl. Between he and I, we would try and understand manufacturing problems and technical problems that came up. And as a result, since I spent that much time with him, eventually I mentored under him to where, since I was fascinated with optical design and all that, even though I wasn't theoretically supposed to be working that much on that, since I was mainly an electrical engineer, I was so fascinated with it, I ended up doing a lot of the follow-on work after he left the company, including 2 scanner designs myself from the optical point of view. Frank Check here, he had his hands full with a lot of the digital on it, so he didn't have quite the time and the ability to get involved on it, and so that's why he didn't get quite as involved on that part of it. And so working with Frank Nickl, I found that as as Frank Check had said, very, very useful because he didn't micromanage you. He gave you all of the equations you needed to go away and come back and come up with a solution, and then he could help you with, you know, critiquing your solution, etc. He didn't try to do all the design himself and want to put his personal stamp on it.